Hey everybody, welcome to Habatat Now. I'm your host, Aaron Shea. It's an honor to have you join me today on this wonderful day in October. Hope you got your Halloween costume ready to go. I'm going as Chucky because it was the easiest thing to do. I got a sweater and I can carry two kids. It's gonna be great. I can't wait for that. But I'm grateful to have you all. And yeah, we're throwing two NGG presentations in today or this month because of people are artwork is incredible and people have to make it at their own pace. So this week we have Joe Ivacic, who is a winner. Can you hear me? A winner from 2021's NGG event, which stands for Not Grandma's Glass, which focuses on artwork that is not in Grandma's art collection yet. And also we are joined today by Daniel Marder, who is his collaborator. We'll learn a little bit more about them as we go on. Let me start sharing my screen and you can see what I'm looking at. So this is our little tag starter if you know where to start. So we're planning our Glass Coast weekend. It's going to be maybe like the 22nd or 21st of February. We're figuring it out this week, so let me know if you're interested. It's going to be fun. It's going to be totally different. Ferd's heavily involved in the planning of this event, and more details soon. I don't want to spoil anything. Our International Glass Invitational is going to be moved to June. We're working out the details with the GAS event, which will also be here on top of the Michigan Glass Project. So if you haven't got an email from me about the details, I'm working on sending those out probably early next week. It's all written up just to save the date, and then we're working on the invitation. But if you've done this before, you know what it's all about. So today, October 8th, we have an opening for artist John Moran, who was very successful, hint, hint, say no more, at the Netflix show Blown Away. He has a whole exhibition set up. There's like 12 works down there. He'll be here. He just did a demonstration last night at Michigan Hot Glass and Albert Young Studio. I saw some feed on Facebook of them working together. Incredibly powerful work. Come tonight between 6 and 8 o'clock, have a chance to meet him. Upcoming in the same month, a later show with Deanna Clayton and Stephanie Trenchard. Deanna talked and gave a talk earlier about, I think last month, about her upcoming show, and we'll be doing one with Stephanie the day of the show. Very cool, very exciting, and I love their work, and I hope you do too. And then lastly, this month, the Glass Art Fair opens online. We've been working really hard to create this virtual art fair. It's our 3rd year of this exhibition. It is quite an incredible thing to experience online. So more details soon. Sign up on the website for the VIP password. Enough said, enough said. Michael Behrens and Thomas Ivacic will have exhibitions in November. So more details about that soon. I want to get through all this so we can get to our winner celebration. So in 2021, many of you know, we asked 12 artists to create artwork celebrating what they want to see in a museum, their exhibitions of their dreams, and to create a virtual experience. And a lot of the artists that were invited were very excited because it really gave them something to focus on during the pandemic. It started off January 2021 with Morgan Peterson, who is a winner. And today we're focusing on Joseph Ivacic, whose presentation was incredible. He did these beautiful shields. He'll go into it. More about that in a minute. So I mentioned this earlier. The website's up, notgrandmasglass.com. You can see all of last year's and this year's and soon to be next year's, because we're getting real close to 2023. All the artists are selected. You're going to love 2023 just as much as the previous years. So now that I'm done talking, I want to invite Joe to come join us today and talk about his new body of work and his new experience. He's also joined by, I mentioned, Daniel Marder, who is his longtime collaborator and friend. So Joe, say hello and thank you for joining me. Stop sharing my screen now.
Okay. Hello, everybody. How we doing? Nice, Aaron. I like that picture. It's a great costume.
Little fun one. Yeah. Thanks, man. Thanks for being here today.
Yeah, my pleasure. So I'm gonna share my screen and dive right into this. Yeah, I don't want to talk anymore. I don't want you to look at me.
Yeah,
don't look at me.
We've been showing Joe for years. We showed him recently at our Prime Space. He was participating in our nationals, so it's great to give him another focus like this.
All right.
And this is very new and exciting, so I'm looking forward to seeing this whole entire spiel once we get going.
Share screen. Okay.
Share screen. Click the screen you want to share.
There we go.
There you go.
A little technical difficulties. I'm sorry. I'm technically challenged.
Perfect.
All right, here we go. So, okay. I am going to be discussing kind of a removal from what I was making last year. I needed, as a winner, they're like, we need you to come back and present again in 12 months or in less than 12 months. And so the idea of transforming part of your body or moving into something new was kind of difficult. And so what I've done is I've kind of timelined my 12 months since my show last October. And so I titled this Professional Vacation and Creative Exploration. Can you mute everybody?
Yep,
Aaron?
I'm doing that right now.
Okay. So let's see. So since the last show, I'm just going to give you some bullet points. I've done some local and international travel. I've been part of a couple group shows, and I've had some speaking engagements as well as 3 different museum exhibitions, one in Iowa, one in Rockford, about 75 miles west of Chicago, and at the Wadsworth Atheneum, which is in Connecticut. I'm going to show the work that I had in each of those. It's been a whirlwind 24 hours. And so last night I was at the opening of the biennial at the Rockford Art Museum. And so here's images of me speaking and standing in front of the 2 pieces that were selected. That show runs through the 22nd. This is the piece titled Why that is in the Fired Up show at the Wadsworth, which was curated by Brandy Culp. She's been an amazing champion for our material and narrative-driven work within it. And this show runs through the 5th of February. This show just ended last weekend, but it was at the Dubuque Art Museum, and I had 2 pieces there. One was titled Grass is Greener, the other was Singa. Both of these pieces have been shown by Habatat. And so I'm going to recap my prior 2 bodies of work that I discussed last year and kind of dive into the newer stuff that I've explored over the last 12 months, just for anybody that's new that hasn't seen the prior one. And so last year I discussed a series of riot shields, which were brand new to me at that time. And they reflected a temporary set of barriers that provided an alternative view to conflicting perspectives. And so I use these temporary barriers as metaphors towards our set of beliefs. And so I'm asking the viewer to set down their barriers and kind of start to listen and explore. This piece is titled Why, which is at the Wadsworth, and it possibly might stay there. We'll see. Mm-hmm. But this was part of a body that was bridges and barriers. And so the barriers, this is all glass except for the barbed wire up at the top, which is fabricated out of brass. And again, the bridges to me reflected a bringing of people together, and the barriers was a separation. So, you know, I have this push and pull based on the object that I'm creating, and yet the image tells kind of a unique story within the piece. And so this piece is about climate change and what we're doing to our planet and the mess that our future generations are going to have to clean up. So to me, I wanted to explore what the role of an artist is in this modern era. And so, again, this is solely from my perspective. I'm sure there's a bunch of more things, and some people will say, as an artist has no right to discuss some of these things, but this is what I attempt to do. So I want to document historical events. I want to tell a series of stories. You know, as a glass artist, we know that we're constant creators, not just of artwork, but also attachment, how the work is shown, how the work gets photographed, how the work gets presented, things along those lines. So from there, you know, art should have an element of beauty, but it should also be something else as well. And then right now, I believe with what's going on through the NGG shows and, you know, the curatorial events of some of these museums, really attempting to push glass as an accepted sculptural medium to a non-craft set of collectors, I think is really, really important. So I want to say thank you so much for everybody that's doing that, especially Brandy. The first body that I'm going to be discussing I started making these pieces right after my NGG show. And so what I was doing was I was documenting the insurrection and the attempted cover-up, not realizing that that the January 6th committee would actually come up with some great things. I thought that all of that information was going to get swept under the rug. And so for me, this was about documenting that series of events and how things were attempted to be covered up. And so the base image in these 4 paintings all come from images of the January 6th insurrection. And so I started to address the idea of the cover-up through images and paintings that were inspired to me by Dutch still life paintings, because I think about wallpaper as covering up a bad wall. If there's cracks, you throw up wallpaper and no one ever knows. So, and then also there's some detail images about the paint by number sections, but they discuss how it was planned. If you think about paint by number in terms of a creative exploration, they give you all the colors, they give you the information, and all of it is drawn onto the canvas. All you have to do is fill in the gaps. And so I'm trying to use that narrative as kind of a step into what I'm doing. And so this text is a Banksy text, but I find it very relevant to the work that I make. And so I wanted to share it. So art should comfort the disturbed and disturb the comfortable. So I'm doing a sequential set of, like, the next 3 slides are like the sequence of how I covered up my current paintings. And I don't paint very often, but when I do, for me, it's very difficult to cover up something that I spent so much time working on. So each of these images, I'm kind of saving as a possible either print or NFT or something along those lines. I haven't really figured out yet what to do with them, but I figured documenting the process is kind of important. So as you can see, you're getting a full view of this insurrectionist that definitely he's holding a Capitol Police officer's riot shield, and yet he definitely is not a Capitol Police officer in that outfit. And so as we start to build layers, all of these floral forms are hand-cut stencils, and some of them are as many as 12 different layers. And so, I thought about how wallpaper is made also. It's a series of either stencils or silk screens. And so I'm trying to apply that same technology into my work. And yet I've got drips and runs and gaps in parts of this to kind of show elements of the speed and the way that they were attempting to cover it up through verbiage, where they changed it from, oh, these aren't insurrectionists, they were just protesters. Oh, they're not protesters, they're patriots. Oh, it was a peaceful event. It was a loving crowd. And so through that dialogue change, we're ending up with a different set of images. And so the piece on the far right is, the piece on the right is the finished piece. And so again, it's continuing to develop that level of narrative. And all of this is acrylic and aerosol. And so some of the layers I'd gone back in and started to paint like more and more information on top of the aerosol. For me, it's really difficult to find a stopping point on this, because I feel like you can just continue to go. So here are details or images of the details. And as you can see in some of these, I'm trying to show and expose the paint by number sections. And so this piece is titled A Deadly Arrangement. There's its size and its information. And so on this next set, I actually changed my flowers, because in the prior pieces, they're really beautiful. A lot of them were inspired by, they're just inspired by traditional flowers, but these are nightshade. If anybody knows what nightshade is, it's a deadly flower, or number one, it's a deadly flower, but it also makes deadly berries. So if we ate this, it's harmful to us. And so the idea being that I'm discussing this beauty and this underlying poison that we're being served through this. So this piece is titled One Day at the Capitol, and the text in the background is the quote that Trump made the day of the insurrection, right before the insurrection kind of started. Again, all of these titles are based on the either things that were said by our prior president or things that were said by broadcasters about that event. So this piece is titled "Claim Another Victory." And also, I'm trying to include this kind of cloud cover and this expedited process with the brush to give it almost like a dreamlike feeling, attempting to push the background to this surrealist state, so you're unsure of what you're seeing, and there are levels of detail. Here, I'm going to go back one. So there are levels of detail that you can see that are really, really sharp, and then the rest of it is actually blurred. So, and then this is the final piece out of this series called "A Peaceful Protest," or "Peaceful Protesters," excuse me.
So the white parts are the paint by number parts. Is that what's going on?
Yeah, absolutely. So the outline sections are the paint by number sections, the sections that haven't been filled in yet, but that they're planning to kind of cover up all of that background information with.
Gotcha. And that stays there like that, right? It's part of okay, so it's like the cover up continues.
Yeah, it's an ongoing process where it's incomplete, and yet parts of it are full, parts of it that are the full image that have been actually gone back in with either acrylic or oil paints to build up the layers of detail, to take them from that stenciled state to a more refined, almost camera quality state, I guess, as close as I can get technically.
Oh, you're a hell of a painter, my friend. These are awesome.
Thank you, buddy. I appreciate that. And so how it translates to my glass is, this is a piece titled "How I See Myself," and the central section is mirrored. If anyone has a clue how to photograph a mirror without getting a really bad background, please send me information on it, because this piece is actually, it's 3 panels of glass that are either reverse painted on both sides, or not painted at all. And so there's a layering effect that happens within the piece. I've just made decisions about how I want the information to be seen. And so the central section is mirrored, and it's intended to be viewed. It's intended to engage the viewer and draw them into the piece, actually, to see themselves in it. I thought about the way that the Endless Mirror series by Tim Tate, and thought about, okay, you're able to visually explore this space, but you're not included in it. And so I wanted to do the opposite, where I was including the viewer within the work. And so there's another angle that kind of gives you a little bit more information on the multiple panels. And then here are a couple of details where you're seeing shadows behind sections of the paint that's in the foreground. All right, so I want to discuss the difficulties that go along with making content heavy work, where you're constantly exploring to find out more information about this tragic event, and yet you go through mental fatigue, you're exhausted all the time, you're not happy, you have a really poor outlook on life, you're short with people that are important to you, and then the sky is falling and you just stop smiling and you start to lose your hair. So I needed a break. So I moved into, at this point, I think this was February when I went back to the studio, and I started blowing glass at this time. And so I wanted to make these pieces that were a celebration of our day-to-day experiences. And so, like, dealing with these celebration balloons, and these pieces haven't been mirrored yet, but they're in process. I thought it was important to share with this presentation. But it's like thinking about, oh man, like shorthand responses like YOLO would be something that I would do with this information. So the I heart PS, my spray cans are all under the name Paradigm Shift. And so that's what I'm trying to deal with in this piece. Just kind of playing along with that realm. When we were during the Invitational, I went out to lunch with another couple artists, and there was someone who was celebrating their 100th birthday. And I saw these giant balloons that were like over it. And I was like, yeah, exactly. What I'm making does speak volumes. So, congratulations to that centenarian. So after the start of that work, I was thrilled to be back to an in-person show. And so this is an example of my family and friends that were there and collectors that were at the Invitational. So thank you, Aaron, for including me in that. So towards the tail end of that, we were in May, right after the Invitational. The school year was starting to wrap up, and my wife works for Hyatt. And so part of her perk is it allows her to travel with decent frequency and great benefits. And so we asked our son if he wanted to go to Disney or Morocco, and his response was, let's go to Morocco. And I was like, what 7-year-old wants to go to Morocco? But, we were really, really excited. So here's an image of him on the plane and the shadows of us riding camels. Part of travel for me is really about inspiration. And so that's why I've included this. You also have a tendency to collect experiences and people when you travel. And so our guide was unbelievable. Like he treated us like family to the point where he brought us to his parents' house to have 2 different meals on 2 separate days. And it was the coolest thing. So if anyone is looking to explore Morocco, that's the website, Gateway to Morocco. And our guide's name was Anas. And if you get the opportunity to go and you get him as your guide, there is no way that you're going to have a bad time, because the guy is amazing and he is family now. So from there, I started to really, like, part of my reason for wanting to go there was the imagery and the information that goes into their architecture. And so they have 3 different types of patterns that go into Islamic forms. And so you have the geometric patterns like these. You have the floral or organic, which the one to the far left is a riff on Fatima's hand, and the others just have different leaf patterns within them. But I show the image on the far right, which is the center. The center image is detail, and it's like just to show the scale that they would really put into these religious sites. And it blew my mind, because no walls were the same. Like all this is carved in wet plaster. And so the artisans that created this just blew my mind. And then the third one is text-based. So if you look at, or script-based. So if you look at the slide on the right, the lower 2 panels of that are Islamic text that they weave into their architectural details. And so the rooms to the left are just to show you examples, and my son is in that to give you scale of those spaces. And so the things that I took from this trip were, again, I needed to really explore a lighter body of work. So I needed to really just get into the studio, use my hands, and not really think about what I was making, just go in with a goal and say, all right, I'm going to make really beautiful, opulent objects for a little while. And so I made 2 series, and these are both collaborations with a different artist who's not on the call. His name is David Wynn, and he is a fabulous designer and glass artist and just overall amazing person. So these are blown and hot sculpted, and the compositions can either go on a tabletop or walls. So I'm going to show a series of these pieces that have bases, but Aaron, if there are a set of collectors that are like, look, I have a space and I need an installation, let me know and we'll work with them, okay?
Sounds good.
With either of these bodies. So here again, the same information on the left was what was on the prior slide, but here is an image of ferns and flowers in an actual like raw space, not artistically documented. So this is the same piece here. This is just one side of it. The next slide is the reverse image, or what would be the back side of this. And so again, these are all, hot sculpted or hand blown, and it deals with just going back into making work with your hands, kind of getting, this is like post-pandemic as well, where it's trying to get things back. So details. Here's a smaller set to kind of give ideas on what they would just look like as individuals. So the second body of work is called Crystalline Growth, and it was inspired by the geometric patterns. And so as these pieces progress, I think I'm going to start using some of those Moroccan geometric patterns and put them into some of these facets that are on these larger quartz sections. And so these as well can be wall mounted or tabletop. And so here's just a small set of 3 of these gems. And, I've tried to incorporate sections of the base to actually make them look like how they grow in nature. So using smaller lengths of solid cane and frit as their base. So there are 3, and these can be done in any colors. So it's like I just went with 2 sets of different natural gem tones, one being emeralds and one being amethyst.
These are very fun. Very fun.
Hey, yeah, I mean, that's what I needed to do. I just needed a mental break. And so while we were in Morocco, I got news of Uvalde. And when I was there, I received a text message from my collaborator, Danny, who was like, look, we need to have a real conversation about the work that I was making, when I came to Chicago 5 years ago. And so at this point, I'm going to start to weave Danny into the conversation. I'll bring him in 1 second. But to me, it's really important to understand why you do what you do. And for me, all of my work outside of the design elements, the content-driven work is all an attempt to leave this planet in a better place for my son. I'm recognizing and fully aware that we are here for a long-term lease, but yet our future generations have a longer-term lease. And so I want him to have more rights and more things available to him in a better place and environment to grow up in. And so for me, protecting him is my everything. He comes up in every part of why I make what I make, and you'll find his images throughout my work prolifically. So here are a couple examples of them. And here I'm going to bring in Danny. Danny, are you with me? Can you unmute Danny?
There
There we go.
I'm with you.
Danny and his son are off on the left, and I am on my right. And again, this is a video or a visual of us kind of protecting the information that comes to our kids. But Danny, I want you to introduce yourself and tell people what's going on.
I think what was going on here was you said, hey, send me a picture of Lennon, of you covering Lennon's ears. I'm working on this. I'm working on these pieces about information, and I think I'm going to use Jax as a model, but just in case, I want you to send me a picture of Lennon too. Is I think what this picture was about, actually. So Joe came to work over at my studio in Highland Park, Illinois. I'm a retired university teacher. I started a glassblowing program at Salisbury University in Maryland after going to Tyler School of Art and doing glass. And Joe and I think he had his first kind of major show over at my place. And Joe and I have had this relationship where I kind of never stopped being that university teacher, where I kind of hit people over the head with a ball peen hammer when it comes to their work. So I just don't know how to be gentle with hey, so I see what you're doing there, and I'm not fooled. And some people can take it. I'm not trying to be mean, but I just want people to be the best them that they can be. And Joe was one of those people. Some people just are like F you and they run away. But Joe was one of those people who was like, okay, yeah, let's make this better. And so he was always coming back for more, and he got better and better at his work. And then I had to close up shop. I had my first child, and I wanted to experience that and not work the 90-hour weeks in a glass studio anymore. And my wife works for a Japanese pharmaceutical company that used to be located in Deerfield, and we moved to Japan. And Joe and I have talked on the phone in our prospective studios, no matter if separated by the globe or whatever, for pretty much every day, and we still do that. And well, I'm driven by the same things that Joe's driven by, and that's this kind of anal retentive idea of what perfection is in making art. I live art, and I can't help it. It's kind of a mental illness. I've been making art since I was kind of an underachiever in school, growing up in Highland Park, Illinois, and working with materials that I know that I love, no matter what that is. Right now, obviously it's we work with glass for its properties that make sense with what we're doing. But I've always worked with whatever I've found. And so since Joe and I know each other so well, like collaborating and working in the world makes a lot of sense for us. With having kids, I know that Joe is on hiatus. The work that he's been working with takes a lot of toll on you. And I was trying to give him a break from this, but when Uvalde happened, it really broke our hearts. We came from Japan. My kids grew up in Tokyo, and we dealt with a lot of these things like tsunami drills. After the 3/11 earthquake tsunami, it was pretty heavy duty in Japan. And we learned to deal with an earthquake every day, which was weird for us coming from Chicago, where they have earthquakes, but you don't feel them. And then the first thing that we dealt with was when kids came from school and said, hey, how was school today? And they were like, well, we had this lockdown drill. And I'm like, what's that? And when Uvalde happened, I knew Joe was in Morocco, and I'm like, hey man, we got to talk, because I don't know what to do. I can't deal with this anymore. It's killing me. It's my heart is broken. We were getting very emotional about everything, about what was going on in the country, about everyone being torn apart. And I knew that he was on a break, and it was really I didn't want to hurt him, but we had this conversation, and you see the picture, like this stuff was coming up. It was inherent in his work, and it wasn't time to rest anymore. It was time that we said something. We knew that this might be a hard sell, but these things kept coming up.
Yeah. And so also Danny had started this work, 5 years ago, where you started to explore the statistics of gun violence and mass shootings in schools and things along those lines. And so it's like, I felt like this slide was an important include to give you perspective on, like how many deaths happen for children or youths in our country in comparison to everywhere else in the world. And so, it's just horrific, number one, and it's difficult to deal with. But I'm sorry, Danny, I needed you to start to kind of continue that conversation about what you were exploring at that time.
Yeah, when I was a kid, the issue, in Highland Park, like I remember in high school, the big issue was that safety belts. Like the biggest killer of teens was car accidents and alcoholism. Like or kids that drunk and we had wrecked cars outside of the high school saying, prom night, don't drink and drive because that kills more teens than anything. And now we deal with gunshots being what kills more kids, and not just teens. We did the show. It was outside of the Google campus on Lake Street, a pop-up show, and I made the unpopular choice to do my work on gun violence, which was really well received. We had a lot of interest, especially from Canadians, in public art, and then COVID hit, right? So.
Yep. And so when Danny made the call to me in May, we had set up time to work in the middle of July. And so I was in upstate New York for the 4th, and I'll get a news flash on my phone talking about Highland Park. And I was like, what's happening at Highland Park? And so during that, on the 4th of July, for those that don't know, there was a massacre that happened. A young man decided to use it.
Hi, Jimmy. Buddy Hoffman, just checking in. Hope everything's under control. I know that she's supposed to be at a house by Tuesday, and I understand she's.
There we go. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
No, you're good. So this event happens where a young man gets on a rooftop and shoots people that are attending a parade, which my mother-in-law was in the parade. She's safe, but it happens in Highland Park, which is, it's this quiet, sleepy little suburb that this is something that you never would expect to happen. And so Danny was born and raised in Highland Park. And so it affected me one way, but Danny, how did this hit you?
Well, so I wasn't born in Highland Park. I was born in Birmingham, Alabama, but I grew, we fled to Alabama. My family, went to Alabama in the 1800s, and we fled to Alabama because we're Jewish. My family was harassed by the KKK, and my mom thought, well, we'll move up north, and things will be great. It's like a 80% Jewish suburb, and of course, the American Nazi Party is right in Milwaukee, and my family was harassed by the American Nazi Party in Highland Park. But I have friends that live in Highland Park, and the first thing that happened when I heard about this is I got a call from my friend Joe Greenberg, who was on the street, and my friends from high school called and said, "Hey, turn on the TV," and I saw my friend Joe Greenberg sitting in front of Walker Brothers talking to me on the phone while I'm looking at Fox News because they had full coverage, while in Massachusetts, where I live, other news agencies hadn't even picked up on this. And he's like, "Hey, I'm on the street, and my in-laws were right here, and there's people dead on the street." And I'm like, "Get off the phone." And then calls from all of our other friends, and we're like, "What? This happened where? What happened? And why and where?" And then to find out that it's actually my friend's kid who was the shooter, someone who I grew up with. This is something that we thought would absolutely never affect us in a place like, Highland Park, which is just, you hear about these things, you hear about Texas and Uvalde, places where people brandish, the right to carry automatic weapons like it's something that is not something you'd hear about in a liberal area like the North Shore of Chicago. It was shocking.
Yeah, and so for me, the hardest part, are you able to hear me, Aaron?
Yep.
Okay. So for me, the hardest part was attending the memorial and also understanding that the children that were at the parade were the ones that understood how to handle the situation. They heard the gunfire and they ran and hid, while the adults thought it was part of the parade. And so orange is the gun control color. And so that's why this section of the train station is wrapped in orange. And so there were these tags everywhere. And along with those tags, there were small cards that you could take that said "You matter." And so, you know, that it's horrific that something is a reminder like this. But as you know, as you went into it, there were, all of it was words of hope. And so, you know, you also had they had memorials at two separate sites. One was at the War Memorial, which was across the street from this location, and it's open air. And so they also didn't have anybody that was taking care of the maintenance of this space. So people would bring flowers, and yet there were dead flowers that were there, which were also kind of a reminder of this series of events. And so, again, here's just more imagery. And so, you know, when Danny got here, this kind of spawned our collaboration, which was titled the Therax Project, which Therax is a compound used as an antidote. It's a cure-all. It used to be derived from snake venom. And so to us, this work is discussing the difficulties of gun violence and dealing with it, and the ridiculousness that we need to have these drills instead of common sense gun laws that allow for assault style rifles in the hands of Americans. So, Danny, you want to touch on these? Because these pieces were, Danny and I, we blew these pieces together. And so here's our set of molds that we made. We started with a physical positive, which is sitting on top of the mold in the image on the left. And so you're seeing the mold, which weighs, this mold weighed, I think, somewhere around 130 to 150 pounds.
200 pounds.
200 pounds. And so what we did was we coated it with graphite and the inside as a separator. And here is, we have two videos, one of us blowing the backpacks and one of us blowing the bulletproof vests. And so, yeah, this is normal speed for me in the studio. You know, we don't slow down. And so usually we crank out about 40 or 50 of these pieces a day.
What studio is this?
This is Ignite. And so I'm absolutely joking. I think we get maybe 6 of these pieces a day before our bodies stop working. And so to make this size and this scale work, where the usable section of these pieces is about 19 inches tall on its longest dimension, we normally have a team of 4 or 5, and we spread the weight out as much as we possibly can. So if I'm the head gaffer, I am taking the final gather, but I've got my assistants doing other things along the line. In that video, you may have seen, let's see if we can watch it again. So I'm shaping and cooling the glass during this part. Danny's prepping the mold, and as we go into this mold, you know, Danny's going to work the mold, make sure it gets closed. He's shaping it with cork, and then at this point, he comes back and does some final moves with the cork from the outside to shape it. In addition, we're putting faux bullet holes into this piece while the glass is hot. So we're striking it with a rod that is about 1/2 inch in diameter, and we're striking that rod with a hammer to create a fracture in the glass. But the core of the material is hot enough that the glass itself doesn't break, it just punches it through the surface. And so we don't have any details of those sections in our slide presentation, but if someone's interested in it, we'll get images to you, Aaron, of those pieces, and we'll share some of this work in the Glass Art Fair.
Sounds
all right.
Great. Yep. Perfect.
And so
We have some of those in the backpacks.
Yeah.
Backpack pieces, which is the image that's behind Aaron, with the report holes in them.
So this is, the first one was the backpacks. This is the bulletproof vests that are as big as they look. They're actually appropriate for children. It's a child-size vest that covers just below their torso. And so again, rapid speed. I just want to share the process and kind of break up the still videos or the stills in this. And so, I need to get up above the mold quite a bit to drop it into that large mass. And then there's some final shapings that happen right before we put it away, but that's the extent. This gives you an idea of the volume of space. And the slide on the right shows the bottom 6 inches is what is going to be removed. And so these are the pieces directly out of the annealer. And so I had shared these pieces with a series of collectors because Danny and I we were trying to go light speed with this body of work and trying to get it down in Miami this December. And, I needed to have a conversation with some individuals that knew about art and really figure out, does this translate as what we're trying to convey? And the people that looked at it said, I can't see it at this moment. And so everything that we're about to show in the future are works in process. They are completed pieces, but they are pieces that we're going to be continuing to alter in the near future as the body evolves. And so some of it is going to deal with exterior applications of either sandblasting or enamels. In addition, we're probably going to be doing some video work with these pieces with a high speed, like 250 frames per second camera to capture us actually shooting these pieces with firearms. So these are the pieces before being cut right out of the mold. This is a video of Daniel using a diamond blade to chop through this glass. And there's so many different areas where these pieces can fail. And so part of it is like his pace running through that water-cooled blade has to be very, very slow because it can easily chip the glass. I am not good at cold working, and so I'm going to have the master talk about this.
I love cold working, but I'm kind of an enigma in myself. So that's a gem quality diamond blade, which is really the key. So it's a water cooled blade, and I've taped everything off there to just help with the vibrations and everything. And it really just helps me. I've aimed everything. I've left one section, you can't see it, one section where my line is, and I'm cutting through, and this is really fast paced. I'm going super slow. And then I even though I could make one cut, it didn't work to make one cut. So I'm cutting through several cuts to pull off the piece. And then I'm doing a little trim here to trim off the pieces that didn't come off the way I liked it. So I'm doing a little trim. And then I hold it up in the end because I know I'm filming and I want to show what it looks like at the end. So these pieces, the biggest issue that I have with them, cutting them and cold working them, was that they, in glass work, as a glass sculptor, I've learned that you want everything to be the same thickness. But when we mold blow these, the tops are very, very thick in comparison to the sides, which end up being like less than a 1/4 inch thick. So it becomes very difficult to work with them because we can't get them all to be the 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch thick that I want them to be. So the thing that I was trying to work with them was how to get them to look less like big rocks and to start looking like bulletproof vests again. And what we were trying to get through with the concept as an artist and as a sculptor of what we're talking about. And my daughter is very much my daughter Sophia is 14. She's in high school. She's the one that came to me and was like, hey, Dad, we're doing lockdown drills in school in 3rd grade. And so I have my kids save all of their school papers and put them in bins, and we go through them later. So I have giant files full of their school papers. And so Sophie in the studio is down in the studio with me, and I said, hey, why don't you grab your bins of school papers and let's go through them. And the kids during COVID just did nothing but incessantly doodle on everything. So she has her drawings and personal things through all these school papers. And oddly enough, in Massachusetts, a lot of the things in her school papers that I found were all about civil rights and things that are really relevant to our issues that we're talking about. And so we started selecting things about her school papers and the things she learned in school, which formed her personality as a person. And I thought with these kids and the kids that were lost, like in a situation like Uvalde, that each one of these vests could talk about the personality of a child that we are trying to protect with these vests, which is a vest is not going to protect a child in school. What's going to protect a child in school is removing the danger. And so to have a vest being made out of glass is really talking about how it's a stupid idea. You know, this is my personal opinion. And so how can we bring the vest, the idea of a bulletproof vest for a child that people are suggesting they should wear at school, into the idea of this sculpture, this object, which needs to be clear to look like glass, but look like a vest at the same time, and be associated with a child without having the subject be so heavy that no one wants to look at it, but be interesting enough to engage with it long enough to have a dialogue about the subject. And so the idea about decoupaging the school papers and giving it personality and texture and wanting to engage with it came to mind. And that's what this object is. Everyone has a personality. Everyone has so much interest that you can really dive into it. And these papers and these things are things that my child selected that she was interested in. So when you look at it, you're looking at her personality. So, you know, it's a juxtaposition to what we're talking about.
So this is the first of two different vests that are available. One has this piece is entirely enclosed, and again, these are artist proofs right now. These are works in process. So we're really trying. You know, again, this work is less than 3 months old, and so we are continuing to explore how to make this work more and more understood and developed. And so, you know, some of these pieces, like discussions that we've had, are displaying these pieces on pedestals to have them shown at an appropriate height that a child would be at with these, and possibly putting a mirror beyond it. And there's a number of different ways of illuminating it. There's all sorts of ways that we're looking to explore. But again, this is the reason that we did not pull the trigger on going to Miami this winter with this work, is because we're just not sure it's mature enough. We haven't refined it to the point where it completely conveys our message. And so this is the second of the two vests. And so Danny has explored the cold working process on both of these. One of them, the first one, he cold worked only the bottom off. In this, he has carved out the armholes. So it actually, the volume, you could put your hand inside of this vest. And so again, both of them are decoupage. And you know, these pieces are probably going to get coated with a resin or some sort of bullet resistant / bulletproof material. So at a certain point, we will be showing some of these refined like this and undamaged, and some of them will be shot with the gun, with a gun, excuse me. And you will have the bullet refraction and the glass kind of shattered and yet held in place, kind of assisting the narrative on what this does to both a child and a family and a community. So these are all narratives of elements that we're trying to deal with. So these are the two vests, and these individual pieces are titled Clear 1 and Clear 2. Right now, they're just working titles. From there, we've also dealt with the idea of backpacks. They are, outside of the idea of bulletproof vests, they actually make bulletproof coatings and plates that you can put inside of a child's backpack. And so, you know, we started to explore the idea of what a backpack is to a young child. I mean, yes, for school, it's something that they carry things back and forth to, but it's also your day trip organizer. It is your, you know, it's what you take to a slumber party. It's what carries your entertainment. It's what carries your clean set of clothes. And so to me, those are all elements of what we're exploring. And so Danny right here with these pieces has kind of started to fill them or collage them with found object. And so I'm going to let Danny communicate about that.
So this is another leftover also from Japan. Like when my kids were in Japan, like the Japanese backpack, and I don't know if you guys know anything about Japanese culture. It's part of the uniform. These little waterproof backpacks. The Japanese kids have a hat, and during certain times of year they wear shorts, no matter how cold it is. And they have these special waterproof backpacks. It rains a lot in Japan, and it's a thing. When we came back to the US, like kids have backpacks, but they're just, whatever. My kids are really, they really care a lot about their backpacks. It's their life. And one of the things that struck me as really, it hit me really deep was Uvalde at a crime scene at a school shooting. What's left behind is the backpacks. And the first thing I thought was, if a kid doesn't come home and they're returning someone's belongings, they're returning that kid's backpack. And what's in that kid's backpack that comes home every day? The kids come home, they drop that backpack, at the foot at the door, and and I tell my kids, I'm like, take your snack out of there because it's gonna get moldy or whatever. That's their life in there. That's their personality. They got their crumpled up papers. They got their snack. They got their homework. They got their gym shoes or their socks or whatever. It's their gaming system or their phone or every kid's backpack is different. Their friends come over for a visit. It's a little cache. It's a little time capsule of who they are, and everyone's different. We carried backpacks when I was in school in the 80s too. It hasn't really changed that much, but it's changed a lot. My kids they have these little charms that in Japan they used to stick on, the little Hello Kitties, the little anime figures. They do the same thing here. It's a capsule of their personality, and it says so much. Now they're exploring at schools that the kids have to carry. My daughter brought this up to me. She said they're voting at school if the kids have to carry clear backpacks now, so you can see the contents. Make sure there's no weapons inside. Because she saw the clear backpack, she's like, "Oh, is it like the plastic backpacks that they're talking about us wearing at school?" And I'm like, "No, this is art. It's a different thing. It's a fascinating thing that we're talking about now. It's part of the personality."
And so also the reason that these pieces are all in clear glass, number one, it's easier to work in clear glass, but also to me, these objects in clear glass have a relevance, almost like a ghost-like quality of the things that are left behind after that individual is no longer there. Danny talked about you coming in the back door and setting your backpack down as a kid, and then that's where it stays. And your parents come in and they trip over it, or you as parents come in and you trip over your kid's stuff. And the thing is that backpack's not going to go away if, let's say something happened to that child. And so every time you see that backpack, it's a reminder of that individual and their day-to-day existence. And so here's another set of images of this. There are two, the backpack in the foreground has hot sculpted shoulder straps on it. And it was all done, all assembled hot. And then the two pieces in the back will have riveted straps attached to them that are actually from actual backpacks. And so another thing that we're kind of thinking about along the lines of this work is this idea of how can we do some form of community outreach or community programming or community like objects that are about the community that make this. And so we started with this idea of using spiral bound notebooks and inverting the text that goes along with it or the phraseology. So instead of spiral bound, you think about bound to spiral, which means something completely different than holding something together. It means things falling apart. And so the idea being that these would be elements of the backgrounds. This is a digital rendering, but the scale is appropriate for what it would be. And so the idea of the identities of these kids, each kid is drawing on their spirals. I remember as a child, every class had its own spiral, and every spiral had its own artwork on it. And that's something that I did when I was bored and trying to capture my own mind in that class and keep me from an outburst. And so these installations would possibly go behind the bulletproof vests and the backpacks. And then these could be sold either as a group itself, or they could be done as an individual. And people would be able to select the specific spiral bound notebook that they would want. And as that kind of decays and degrades, you're going to get a completely different image with what's there and what's not there, and how this event has affected others. And so with that, we're kind of moving towards the end of our presentation, but it's like, this idea of Therax to me is bigger than Danny and I. And so I am looking for help in whatever way people think it could be relevant, whether it be suggestions on who to talk to or people associated with different anti-gun groups, and so anything, feel free to shoot Aaron or me an email or a text or any of it that you find to be relevant, and we'll have a discussion about it, because I want to partner with those things to make our world a safer place, especially for the kids that are, for the beings that are going to live on past us. And so, Dan, you got anything else to add?
Well, I think it's important to note that, for a really long time, there's a core group of artists that have been working in media to to say what's been happening in the world that we live in. Artists are charged with the task of talking about what's happening in the world. Unlike the news or newspapers or even hearsay, we don't get edited. If you go and you look at a Caravaggio painting, that individual had a lot to say about what was happening in society at the time. We are the keepers of history. And currently, right now, I think Aaron pointed this out, there really hasn't been a glass movement. I mean, glass as an art form is really young. There really hasn't been a lot of art historians that have been talking about contemporary art that much lately. And I think right now is high time. I mean, I think what we're doing right now, there's a lot of artists that are prime. There's a lot of people that are doing things, and we're starting to band together. We're getting noticed. There's people in museums right now. Since COVID has started to really, people have gotten a grip on vaccinations and people are getting outside. Museums are changing. People are starting to collect contemporary things. This is the time right now where young artists like Joe and people who are hitting their mid-career strides like me are starting to get the attention of art historians. And this is the work that is starting to make it in those times. So the art of our time right now is what's happening. And even though the art, it might have some uncomfortable ideas, the point of this art is to have a dialogue about what's going on. It's art to have a conversation. In the 80s, it was people feared art, and the tag phrase was fear no art. Now it's to have a dialogue. We don't want to be derisive. We don't want to say like, oh, you red people are bad or you blue people are bad. We just want to have a conversation. We want everyone to talk. And the art that we're making is trying to have that conversation. If you support the art, you're supporting the conversation. And as long as we're having a conversation, we're not beating each other up. And that's how we're going to survive. And that's how glass is going to survive. If you love glass or any art, any museum, any gallery, because without the gallerists, without the museum, and without the art and without the artists, we're all not going to survive. We need it all, because without all of that, what are we going to have? A bunch of bean counters and a bunch of millionaires that are fighting each other for who has the most toys? We need the art. So if you can support that, if you can get behind what we're talking about, it doesn't have to be like this. We can affect social change and make things better just by having a conversation about it.
Yeah, I'm absolutely with that. Aaron, are we good to do Q&A?
You're
I
muted.
can't hear you at all, bro. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Yeah, feel free to stop sharing. Yeah, we can definitely take any questions from the audience. Thank you guys for joining me today. I'm glad you guys can share your voice and your message with not only the dialogue today via the NGG presentation, but your work that really explores, what is important and what current events really affect you. And without, like you said, without the arts, these things kind of slide by, but you guys have these amazing abilities to create and share your message that help people gain with the idea of catching the attention of those who can make the changes and beyond. So we're going to continue this conversation in a way. We're planning another Zoom, and I'm talking to Joe about it right now, on December 17th, exploring a new concept to really get behind, what's happening currently, like you were talking about, up and coming and mid-stride artists. But this is what art is about right now. I see it in everything you look around, from like artists up and down the spectrum. So join us and make sure to pencil that date in, which is a Saturday, December 17th. It'll be our last Zoom of the year, so people can really resonate with the concept. And we've invited Brandy and obviously Daniel and Joe, and we'll put out other invitations as time goes by and we figure stuff out. But it is incredible to have you join me today. People are going to be watching this later on YouTube. So if you see this on YouTube, please like, subscribe, and share so other people can get the message of what's going on, especially with the NGG presentation. There'll be another one next week with artist Krista Israel, who is our second of 4 winners from the year 2021. So tune in for that. And anybody else have any questions or any statements, feel free to tune in now. But I'm grateful for you all joining me today and look forward to seeing you all very soon. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Daniel, for joining us
missed it. They're hanging up.
and being part of NGG.
Absolutely.
All right, guys. Well, have a great weekend, and we'll see you all next week.
Hey, Aaron, I think we got a question.
Sure.
Are people waving goodbye?
People probably waving goodbye.
Okay.
But if anybody has any follow-up, feel free to contact myself or Joe or Daniel about this, and make sure you're involved one way or another. Be well, everybody. Have a great weekend. Take care.